Say that again? Score sheet, yes.
Okay.
And Dr. Forrester is coming next week, and she's going to bring those with her. So you'll get those next week. Okay? All right. So let's see. I have the other winners up here. Fiddler first place, Mackenzie second place in individual performance. Zach Smith got second place for individual website. Jade Tyndall got third place for her paper. Grace Mertz got first place in individual exhibit and got $75. Zeke Laird got third place for his documentary, and Joanna Herrera and Karina Lopez got second place in group exhibit. Give them a hand.
Yeah.
Give them a hand. Let me tell you, they were going up against 39 other group exhibits, and they were enormous. Okay, but here's the other thing. Mr. Seaton and I, we had to have another teacher point this out to us, a teacher from Central, because we were so overwhelmed that we were like, oh my gosh. Well, we kicked butt and took names. We won the most. We had the most wins. We beat Central. We beat Shiloh. We beat all the big dogs. We beat the little dogs. It was awesome, 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 awesome.
So probably because we're scared of you.
Because they're scared of what?
It's probably because people in the South are scared of you if you lose.
No.
That's what I'd go for.
But I did say on the first day that I introduced it, I said, we're going to take them down. We're going to take Central and Shiloh down. I did, okay? And we did it. Now, when I said that to you that day in class, there was a little, like, nugget of fear in my heart when I said it. But I really, really was.
Yeah.
Because that's a big thing to do, because they usually sweep the categories or sweep most of the categories, and we had 2 wins in exhibits, and those are usually the 2 categories that they sweep. And we swept the individual performances. I mean, it was just, we won in every single category except for group website. So we had a win, I should say, in every single category except for group website, and then just swept the individual performances. So it was a really, 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 really good day. Yes.
Who else besides us created?
What do you mean? I just showed you.
Well, that's for the whole school, right?
No, well, that's for the 8th grade. And then we had Lawson Smith in the 7th grade, got 3rd place individual performance. We had some 7th grade girls win group performance, and they came in second.
Was that the big one?
Yeah. 6th graders got, yes, they got the group documentary. And did they come in 3rd?
Yeah.
It was either 3rd or 2nd. So, brothers.
Neither of the rock and roll groups.
I know. But the exhibit category, all you had to do was look around the room to see how tough that was.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And the other thing that I didn't like was the Central crew came in and their boards were like beyond what was in the regulations. Mm-hmm. You know, they were taller than they were supposed to be. They were way wider than they were supposed to be. So.
They moved hours to get
Yes. So it's really irritating, and that category is just ridiculous. So it's tough. I told you it was going to be tough. You did a great job. Exactly. So, and you did a great job, and I was proud of everybody. Yes.
What was Grace's topic? I didn't even see.
Grace's topic is triangle shirtwaist fire.
What?
Triangle shirtwaist fire happened in the early 1900s. It was a factory. We didn't have fire codes then, so it was a factory, and it caught on fire, and people couldn't get out. Right? And the doors, I think this is really interesting, the doors, I guess, like, opened in or whatever instead of opening out. You couldn't so like if everybody tried to rush out the door and you opened it this way and you couldn't easily get out, now your doors have to open that way so that it, anyway, crazy stuff. It's a really, like, horrible. People were jumping off the top of the building and stuff to get out. Yeah. There are pictures on our class Facebook page. You can like Mrs. Nation's U.S. History class on Facebook and you can see them. Yeah. Because Ed Moto is a pain in the butt to put pictures on sometimes. Okay, all right, so we've got to get going today because if you look over there at the important information part of the board, you'll see that we've got a lot to do. You have a study guide tomorrow, you have a test on Wednesday, you have a notebook and an agenda quiz on Friday. It's a packed week, so we've really got to move it. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you're
going to take the test on Wednesday, so yeah, you're going to have to get caught up. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do it says on here that you needed to have George Washington's admin notes, page 20 in your notebook out. We're going to finish those. So let's go ahead and get started with that. And as usual, my board is doing crazy stuff. So everybody be patient. Page 20. Page 20 in your notebook. And we're going to do a little recap. We are going to do group work today, and we are going to do an exit ticket. So know that that same exit ticket from Thursday, and if you weren't here on Thursday, you don't know what I'm talking about, but you evaluate each other and evaluate yourself and stuff like that. So just be aware of that. Carruthers, if you'll turn off the lights. Okay, now here's where things get fun, but it doesn't always leave my toolbar up there. So you'll find sometimes that I have to go back and forth between the full screen and the not full screen, and I'm sorry, and I apologize now. I sent in a work order and we're crossing our fingers that it gets fixed, but it seems like it doesn't.
You want to write this down?
We did this Thursday, and if you weren't here Thursday, you can write it down, but we've already written it down. I'm just recapping so that you remember what we were talking about. Okay, we were talking about George Washington's administration right now, and this is the last hurrah with George, and then we're going to talk about John Adams, our second president, the last half of class. But when we did this Thursday, we talked about the fact that George Washington was in charge of organizing two branches of government. What were they, class? Judicial and executive. Okay. Judicial is the court system. What's the highest court in the land? Supreme Court, which is set up by this act right here, the Judiciary Act of 1789. Our entire court system is mapped out in this law. You have to know Judiciary Act of 1789 for the test. So you need to be sure that is written on your paper and that you have information down about it. Then George Washington organizes the executive branch and creates the cabinet. The cabinet is what?
Advisors.
Yes, advisors. Okay. And what are some of those positions in the cabinet? What are they
Board.
called? State. Okay.
Postmaster General.
Yes. Okay. Postmaster General, Treasury, Attorney General, War, State. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next one. Okay, so here are all those positions. So you got Secretary of State, Secretary of War, Attorney General, Secretary of the Treasury, Postmaster General. The one thing that I know we did not do on Thursday is you need to know some of the people who are filling these positions. So does anybody know who George Washington's Secretary of State was?
Yes. Was it Jefferson?
Yes. Thomas, I'm just going to put TJ, okay? And Secretary of State, Foreign Affairs, okay? In charge of dealing with other countries. Then Secretary of War, I don't know if you remember him from the movie The Crossing, but Henry Knox was the general in charge of artillery or cannons.
Wait, was that the bigger guy with
he was
the
a
glasses?
big guy, yeah. Glover would always make fun of him about how he was fat. So, Henry Knox is George Washington's Secretary of War, okay? Attorney General, you don't need to know who he is, okay? But that's the nation's lawyer and gives George Washington legal advice. Postmaster General, you don't need to know who that first person was either. That's not required on the test.
But you know him?
You do need to know. I do not remember. I want to say it's Benjamin Franklin, but I think I'm wrong on that one. This
You're
one,
right, you're right.
am I right? This one's Edmund Randolph. I know that for certain. Okay, this is A.H. Who's A.H.?
Adam.
No? No.
Hamilton.
Hamilton, yes. Alexander Hamilton is the Secretary of the Treasury. Okay? And remember, Friday we did a Socratic circle. And what's going on between Hamilton and Jefferson?
They have different ideas for
Yes, right. They oppose. They have opposing viewpoints. Okay? Alright, so we recapped the judicial, the executive that he created, the Judiciary Act of 1789, the cabinet positions. Now we're going to go on and we're going to acquire new information about George Washington's admin. And what we're going to find out, we're going to talk about his foreign policy struggles, which in my opinion are very similar to a chess game here. Because there's a lot going on. A lot.
But you want to write this down.
Oh, of course, yes. From here on out, we're doing the things that we did not do on Thursday. So you need to be writing down everything that you can write down. And I'm adding to what's on the board. So you're also going to want to try to get down what I'm saying and what notes I'm adding. Okay, here's what you need to know. let's see, Britain. We signed a treaty with them in 1783. It's called the Treaty of Paris.
Second one.
Okay? All right, that's right. It was the second Treaty of Paris. Well done, Tyler. Okay? And in that Treaty of Paris, they agreed to abandon forts on our lands that we acquired because we won the Revolutionary War. And Britain also agreed to pay us reparations, which is a fancy word for paying us money. Britain agreed to pay us money because they lost. It happens in treaties, especially in this time period. If you lose, you pay the winner.
Does that still happen?
They demand you to pay them.
I don't know if we have done that in modern history.
Well, maybe just not money, but like supplies.
Yeah. It would be something to look into for sure. So here's the deal. Britain has not done these things. These things that they promised in that treaty have not happened.
Okay.
So what you need to know is that, and it's down here, George Washington writes up a treaty. It's called Jay's Treaty because George Washington sends John Jay, the first Supreme Court Justice of the United States, to Britain with Jay's Treaty. So it's named after John Jay, who actually goes and delivers the piece of paper. And this is the treaty right here. This is Jay's Treaty. Okay? So John Jay goes to Britain and says, hey, we want you to sign this piece of paper with us saying that you will go ahead and abide by the provisions of the Treaty of Paris. And that you will go ahead and fulfill, most importantly, these two promises that you made in 1783. Know that it is roughly 1789 now. For 6 years, they have failed to follow through. Britain does sign the document, but what I want you to know is that Britain doesn't like that we did this, okay? And Britain signs the document with a hand behind their back and their fingers crossed and they're winking. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh yeah, sure, we'll sign that piece of paper. Yeah, sure, we'll pay you. And yeah, sure, we'll leave those forts. Wink, wink. Okay? All right, here's the next thing going on while George is in office. France. You talked about this, I believe, on Friday. French Revolution is happening in France. We helped, or excuse me, they helped us. Right. And they helped us because we signed an alliance treaty with them. So now what they're saying is, help us. Exactly. You scratch our back, we'll scratch your back. Okay, now here's the next problem. Britain and France always hate each other. They despise each other. With a fire of a thousand suns, it's like Farmington and Prairie Grove. There's no real rationale to it. They just hate each other. Okay? So, when Britain sees that France is in a revolution, which means their country is weakened, right? Then Britain decides to do, what do you think, class?
Attack.
Yes, exactly that. So now there's a war between these two. Okay? It's getting messy, isn't it? Okay? Now here's the other thing you need to consider. We are a brand new nation. We are, in my opinion, the equivalent of a newborn
Baby.
Yeah. We still have that baby smell on us. We're that fresh. Okay? We are that. It's disgusting, but it's true, Pruitt. Okay, we are fresh out of the womb, and everybody knows it. Okay? So, here's the problem. We have signed Jay's Treaty with Britain, saying essentially that, hey, we're now pals. You're catching on, Pac. We've signed this treaty saying that we're now kind of pals with Britain, and that Britain's going to, follow through and kind of just saying, we fought this big war, but now let's go ahead and make things right. Right? And then we signed a treaty of alliance with France, right? And France is saying, hey, come help us. Okay, now, they're now both at war with each other. Oh. So if we help France, we have to break our treaty. Right? If we help Britain, France doesn't like it anymore. Right? Okay? And think of it this way. Let's say we help Britain, but Britain loses. Who's going to take us over?
Nobody.
France. If we help France and France loses, who's going to get to take us over? Britain. And don't you think for a second that Britain isn't already sitting back going, right? So, here's what I want you to know. These two groups know that they have us essentially over a barrel, and they know that they can essentially mess with us. And they try to manipulate us and essentially bully us around, is what happens. Because we really are kind of a joke to most people in the world in 1789. They think we won't make it. Interestingly enough, most foreign dignitaries, think that we won't make it more than 5 years as a nation.
Like what?
Like kings and queens,
Like China?
government officials. China doesn't factor in very much at this point. Not to say that they are not very smart, very cultured, very developed, but they don't really, other than trade, they don't have impact, okay? But we are kind of a joke, and they think that eventually we're just going to go, right, and that we're no longer going to exist. And really, everybody's just kind of sitting back waiting to see who's going to end up taking us over. That's what everybody's waiting for, rather than us being here in 2013. Right, exactly.
No,
yes.
What I don't get this is that French borrowed money from British banks to fight this war. Why would British banks do that?
Because it's making money.
Well, I mean, that's treason against your own son.
Yeah, you can view it that way. But the scary thing is you got to consider greed, and we're going to leave it at that. Okay? All right, so that we don't get too far off topic. But that's what you need to be thinking about at this point in that situation. That's what was going on. Okay, so here's the deal. What do you do if you're George Washington? Because, you've got your Secretary of State that is saying, you've got to help France. You've got Alexander Hamilton, who's not an official on foreign affairs, but he's on your cabinet, and he's saying, no, don't help them. So what George Washington does, and Wadey Pack mentioned it earlier, he decides to stay neutral. Meaning he does not help either side.
But what are
When
Isn't
France
that
get mad?
going to make French mad anyway?
It's going to make them both mad. So here's the deal. There's no good decision. There isn't.
But they can see it. They can see it.
But if they would have helped Britain, would have broke the treaty, and they wouldn't have to leave or anything.
And here's the deal. In diplomacy, you don't want to break treaties. Because let's say 5 years down the road, we get in a war with Britain and we need France to help us again. Is France going to help us after we've broken the treaty the first time? No. So then let's say we go to Germany and say, okay, we're in desperation. We need help. Please help us. Germany's going to say, well, you broke the treaty with France, so why should we help you? Right? Because you're just going to break it with us. So you've got to be careful because you develop a reputation in diplomacy. If you develop a reputation of not following through on your promises, you're not going to get the help when you really need it. And we're not exactly the most stable nation. So we need to be sure that we're going to be able to get help when we need it.
The Australians.
Huh?
So we're going to
The Australians? Yes, Kat.
So what you're saying is they're going to try to stay out of it, and instead of making the French or the British very mad, then just let them fight their fight and become whatever one that.
Right. And I mean, honestly, I don't think any decision is the best decision. I think what George Washington was thinking in this situation is that neutrality had in terms of negative impact, the least, right? Because we're that newborn baby. We don't have resources, really. We don't have money. We don't really have a very good military. So can we really give either one of those countries really much help at all if we did? Not really. And if we did give them help, we would deplete resources to protect ourselves in the end, right?
Yes.
And so I think what he decided was it's better to just be concerned about saving our own butt and sticking to our own selves and kind of putting a fence up around ourselves and putting the blinders on and just letting everybody else deal with their own mess. So that's what's going on there. And you may disagree with it, and I understand if you do, but that's what he went with. Okay. Yep, so here we go. Getting crazy. Okay, so we talked about this on Friday. We looked at these two guys, Hamilton and Jefferson, and we saw that they had opposing viewpoints. Here's what I want you to know. We're not going to talk about this very much. We're going to talk about what these guys did when Washington decided to go neutral. what happened was Washington went to both guys and said, okay, look, I'm not going to agree with either one of you. I'm not going to go with either way. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go neutral. You'll see Jefferson wanted him to help. Jefferson's the Secretary of State. He's the foreign affairs expert. Jefferson says, then that's it. I'm out of here. I'm not your Secretary of State anymore. I'm out of the cabinet. And Jefferson was mad. Okay? Hamilton was hacked off that Washington wasn't going to go ahead and help the British, right? Because that's what Hamilton wanted. If we weren't going to help the French, let's help the British. But Hamilton stayed. But Hamilton, griped too much about it and gave Washington a hard time. What I want you to know is that this is what causes Washington to want to decide and go ahead and quit after his first term, because he gets he feels bad. He's not upset with Jefferson. He feels guilty that he upset Jefferson and caused Jefferson to quit. And as a result of Jefferson quitting, Washington starts second guessing his decision about neutrality. He sticks with it, but he feels as if he has made a bad decision. And so he says, I'm quitting. And of course, everybody says, no, you cannot quit. Cannot quit yet. You've got to at least go 4 more years. So he goes ahead and goes 4 more years. He does a second term, but he does not want to, because he hates this. He hates having to make these foreign policy decisions, and he feels like he's not very good at it. Brooke?
Hamilton and Jefferson, did they run against each other for president at one time?
Yes, they do. Is it 1804 or 1800? We'll find out when we get there, because I can't remember right now, standing here. So, we'll find out. Okay, the only other thing that I want you to know about these two guys is, interestingly enough, Friday, a lot of you, sided with one of these. And we talked a lot about, do you think we need to have a strong central government or a strong state government? Some of you said, well, we need order, right? More than anything. And then some of you said we needed freedom. And then, yes, you're right. Some of you said, well, we need both, right? Yeah. And then whenever we tried to talk about, do you see elements of these guys in today's politics? And some of you, I got the sense like you knew that it was there, but you didn't really know how. Like, because I can tell you don't really know what the political parties believe. So I'm going to take, and that's okay, I'm going to take just these 2 beliefs right here, and I'm going to let you know which political party they would be in based on just those 2 beliefs. If they were alive today in 2013. If they were alive today, just based on this belief alone, Hamilton would be a Dem. He'd be a Democrat. This is a Democratic platform belief. And if Jefferson, you can already guess, he'd be a Republican in 2013. Okay, well, you're catching on. That's, so I said I'm only going to talk about these beliefs right here. See, if we went by viewpoint, it would change based on their viewpoint. So that's why I'm only looking at that one. And I'm not going to take time to go through all the others, but I just thought it might be interesting for you to see, since that's the one belief that we seem to really discuss the most, and I felt like some of you really picked a side. I wanted you to know where it would be if it were 2013 in terms of political parties. Okay. All right. We got one more. Okay. Now, this is your last one, and you need to get this down, because this, you're not going to think it's important, but it actually is. Whiskey comes down to almost being our downfall as a nation. Okay? I know. Very, very strange, but it is true. Okay? All right. Alexander Hamilton. We need money as a nation. So he decides that he is going to create a tax on whiskey. Why? Okay? We need money, and here are his thoughts. And in a way, they make sense to me. People, alcoholics exist. It is an addiction, right? So he needed something that was going to make him continual revenue, right? Not just the occasional purchase now and then. He needed, to tax something that someone would buy on a daily basis. So he decided to tax alcohol.
You should have taxed tea.
Should have taxed tea. Exactly. Yes. Okay, Pruitt has the floor. No way. Don't you interrupt me.
Well, we talked about something like that in BPD. There was a Britain where they were picking apart China, and they started, they were selling opiates, and then they stopped, cut them off, and then they, stopped the Hong Kong and China.
There you go. Yep. Okay. So, Hamilton called it a sin tax, even. Other people referred to it as a luxury tax, but Hamilton called it a sin tax. And I'm not talking about English here. I'm talking about sin, good and evil. Farmers disliked it because the farmers in 1789, they were the ones that made the whiskey. Okay, they grow the grains, exactly. They let it ferment and all that stuff like that, and they sell it. But, the prices go up because of the tax. But the additional money that comes in doesn't go to the farmer. The additional money that comes in through the taxes goes where, class? Exactly. So this extra money goes to the feds, to the federal government. And so the farmers are hacked off. The other problem is that when prices go up on stuff, what naturally happens with consumers?
They don't buy it as much.
They don't buy it as much. Now, admittedly, there's some people that gotta have the whiskey. You know what I'm saying? So, the other problem is that it actually caused crime to go up in the colonies because people would steal so that they could buy whiskey at the inflated price. So it does create some problems. Okay, so to me, this is funny, but maybe it's not really funny in hindsight. But the farmers get so mad that they decide to go all Sons of Liberty on everybody. So they decide to rebel and they decide to start tarring and feathering just the way the Sons of Liberty did because they saw this as the equivalent to the taxation on tea, right? So they were like, well, if the Sons of Liberty, if we, got taxed on tea and the Sons of Liberty did that and we fought this whole war, well, now our own government is doing exactly what we tried to get away from, right? And so now we're just going to do what the Sons of Liberty did. So they would tar and feather the tax collectors for the sin tax. And then it just got out of control, like most rebellions do, right? They started tarring and feathering. Then they started getting a little more physical with their punishments on these tax collectors. None of them died, but there were a couple that were close to death and made it through it. Then they started burning down buildings. Okay, now, you're Britain. You're across the pond, you're across the Atlantic Ocean, and you get word that the United States of America has a rebellion going on over whiskey. Okay? What are you thinking?
I'm better than them.
You're laughing.
You're laughing, and your next plan is what?
Go get it.
Exactly. To take over because we are weak, right? Because essentially what this evolves into is almost, not totally, but it evolves almost into a civil war-like situation. Meaning a rebellion, kind of like what's happening in France. So George Washington has to take care of this, or we're going to potentially kind of implode on ourselves. So he goes in and he calls out each state militia, and there are 13 states, and he says, go put this sucker down because it spreads throughout all 13 states, these rebellions against the whiskey tax. And he is successful in putting down the rebellion. Okay, so it ends. And everything ends up, happy ending, but it could have gone the other way. And what everybody is thinking is, I don't know if you remember with Miss Root, but she talked to you about our first Constitution, which is called the Articles of Confederation. Do you remember that at all?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Right. Under that Constitution, we had Shays Rebellion, and we could not put that down. And that's one of the reasons why we ended up writing a new Constitution, because if your government cannot keep order, then it ain't gonna work, right? So this freaked everybody out because everybody thought, okay, this is Shays Rebellion, part 2 is what this is. And everybody thought, okay, that's it, we're done, right? We've made this Constitution, we've worked we've worked so hard, and now it's over, and it's all because of some gosh dang whiskey game tax. This is stupid.
So it's all Alexander.
Yes, it's all, and Alexander Hamilton kind of becomes more of a hated individual than he already was. He's kind of a dandy is what he is. Alexander Hamilton's very stuck on himself and how he looks. So he's not very well liked anyway, and then it doesn't help that he does this. Yes, and farmers hate him, of course.
It's kind of like that war guy that we watched the movie over. He took his time when we were. Is that?
Yes. Yes, maybe not as bad as Rawl, but he always wants to look very nice and very concerned about appearances, and comes from a very wealthy family. So obviously, rural people, farmers, hate him already. And then when he taxes whiskey, well, that's just adding more fuel to the fire. Yeah, I mean, that's all that they needed. They were looking for another reason to hate the guy, and there you go, he gave it to him. Okay, so here's what what we're going to do now. We're now going to look at John Adams' administration. John Adams, I wasn't going to write something, then I decided to. That's what I get for doing that. John Adams, admin. John Adams is the second president. Okay? Now here's what I'm going to tell you. He has to follow up behind George. And John, God bless him, is no George. Okay? So, he's blunt. He speaks his mind. He will tell you when he thinks you're an idiot. He will tell you when he disagrees with you. And when he disagrees with you, he doesn't do it gently like George Washington. He doesn't just sit and listen. He says, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, you're wrong, and here's why I think you're an idiot. Right? So, he's a totally different personality and has a totally different reputation and approach. What we're going to do today is we're going to do a jigsaw, and I don't know if you've ever done that before, but you're going to break up an article into sections. So here, let's go ahead and get that going. You picked up two things at the door, and if you didn't get them, you'll need to come here now. You'll see you got an article on John Adams. It goes into him and his administration, and it's divided into 4 sections. You have a jigsaw page on which to take notes, and there is a section 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So what I want you to decide in your group right now, in like 30 seconds or less, who's going to do section 1, 2, 3, 4? Okay? Somebody's going to have to double up. Try to be fair. I haven't looked to see what's short. 3 looks pretty short.
Number 2.
So you might want to have to double up, take 3, and then maybe another shorter one.
2, 3, 4, 3.
Okay? All right. The next thing that you need to know, because I'm going to give you about, I'd say about 3 minutes for you to read your assigned section and take notes of your assigned section. Then when 3 minutes are up, you are going to have section 1 person share what section 1 was about. Everybody else fills in their section 1 section of their note page. Then section 2 shares and everybody takes notes on section 2. You'll have 1 minute to share about your section. Okay, all right. I'm going to set the timer for you to read. Read your assigned section and take notes. Remember, we're